Joy is not earned, deserved, or contingent upon circumstances. It is not found in success, possessions, or approval from others. True joy arises spontaneously, without reason, without cause, like sunlight breaking through clouds. The deeper you go into yourself, the more you realize that joy is not a reaction to life. It is the very nature of being, always available, waiting to be recognized. Joy is not something to be earned through achievement, recognition, or accumulation. The mind often convinces you that happiness will arrive once a goal is met, a possession is gained, or approval is granted. Yet all of these are external measures, fleeting and unreliable. True joy does not depend on circumstances or accomplishments. It exists independently, beyond the reach of reward or expectation. When you wait for life to hand you joy as a prize, you are always at the mercy of conditions beyond your control. The mind builds anticipation and hope only to be disappointed when reality does not align with expectation. This dependence makes joy conditional, fragile, and temporary. It is not joy itself you seek, but the fulfillment of imagined requirements. Joy is inherent to the nature of being. It arises when you cease measuring yourself against external standards, when you stop defining worth by what you possess or what others think of you. In the quiet of awareness, untouched by the need for reward or validation, joy manifests naturally, effortless and unbound. It is a state that belongs to you simply because you exist. Seeking joy as a reward keeps the mind restless, trapped in a cycle of striving and waiting. You miss the present moment, unaware of the energy that is already within you. Happiness that is earned through achievement is always followed by another expectation, another condition, another. When this happens, I will be happy. True joy requires no such calculus. It exists now, independent of past or future. Recognizing that joy is not a reward liberates the self from external dependence. It allows life to be experienced fully, without seeking, without expectation, without limitation. When you embrace this truth, you move through the world with lightness, presence, and the freedom to experience bliss at any moment. Joy is not something to be won, it is your natural state, always available, always arising from the very essence of life. Joy that depends on conditions is fragile and fleeting. When you tie happiness to possessions, achievements, relationships, or circumstances, it becomes a prisoner of change. The world is never static, situations shift, people change, and expectations are rarely fulfilled. As long as joy is contingent upon external factors, it is at the mercy of forces beyond your control, constantly at risk of being lost. Dependence on conditions creates an inner tension. You find yourself constantly striving, comparing and judging, measuring every moment against imagined standards. The mind becomes restless, never fully satisfied, always anticipating what must happen for happiness to appear. In this state, even abundance feels inadequate and joy remains distant, slipping through your grasp like water through fingers. Detachment does not mean indifference or apathy toward life. It means freeing joy from the confines of expectation. When joy is untethered from conditions, it arises naturally, effortlessly, like sunlight spilling into a room without asking permission. You no longer wait for validation, success, or external approval to feel complete. The source of bliss is found within the very experience of being alive. True freedom comes when you recognize that conditions are fleeting and yet your capacity for joy is eternal. Circumstances may shift, people may disappoint, and life may challenge you, but your inner happiness remains untouched. Detachment allows you to participate fully in life without being trapped by its fluctuations, to feel deeply without dependence, and to celebrate existence without needing it to meet specific requirements. When joy is no longer conditional, it becomes resilient and ever-present. You begin to experience life in its fullness, noticing beauty and wonder in moments that would have otherwise gone unnoticed. Happiness is no longer fragile, no longer tied to events or people, but a constant companion arising naturally from the depth of your presence, independent of the world outside. Joy cannot be found in thought, planning or expectation. It emerges when attention rests fully in the present. The mind is often lost in memories of the past or projections into the future, creating noise that obscures the simple clarity of existence. In this noise, happiness feels distant, always contingent on events that have yet to happen or that no longer exist. Presence dissolves this distraction, opening the door to natural, effortless joy. When you are fully present, the mind stops measuring, comparing and evaluating. Judgments about what should or should not be prevent the experience of pure delight. In presence, there is no conflict between expectation and reality, there is only experience. Joy arises naturally in this space because it does not need justification, it does not demand reason, and it is not tied to anything outside the self. Presence heightens perception and awareness. Every sound, sensation and thought is experienced fully without interference from past grievances or future anxieties. In this heightened awareness, small moments reveal their beauty and significance. A simple breath, a ray of sunlight or the rhythm of life itself becomes a source of joy previously unnoticed because the mind was lost in distraction. Joy in presence is self-sustaining and spontaneous. It does not require external validation or triggers, it arises from being alive, being conscious and being aware. When attention is anchored in the now, the energy that once fueled worry, regret or fear transforms into lightness, vitality and delight. Presence is the fertile ground where joy can appear without reason and without effort. Practicing presence is a form of liberation. It frees the self from the tyranny of thought and the endless pursuit of conditions for happiness. In the fullness of the moment, joy becomes natural, effortless and unavoidable. The deeper your presence, the more spontaneously joy arises, reminding you that happiness is not something to be achieved. It is the essence of being fully here and fully alive. Judgment blocks the natural flow of joy. The mind constantly evaluates, categorizes and measures everything against a standard of right and wrong, good and bad. In doing so, it creates division and tension, preventing life from being experienced as it is. When the mind judges, it imposes limitations on perception, and in those limitations, joy becomes constrained, hidden behind layers of opinion and expectation. Self-judgment is particularly corrosive. When you constantly assess your actions, thoughts and feelings, you generate inner friction that disturbs peace and prevents happiness. The mind becomes a critic rather than an observer, weighing everything against imagined standards. In this environment, joy cannot arise because the self is trapped in evaluation rather than presence. Judging others also distorts perception. When you label people, situations or experiences as good or bad, you separate yourself from life instead of participating fully. This separation creates tension, resentment and dissatisfaction. Joy requires openness and acceptance, a willingness to experience reality without attaching it to a verdict. Releasing judgment allows connection with life as it is, unrestricted and flowing naturally. Letting go of judgment does not mean ignoring discernment or becoming passive. It means experiencing life without imposing rigid labels and interpretations. It allows awareness to expand, perception to sharpen and understanding to deepen. In this space, the mind is free to encounter beauty, wonder and joy spontaneously without the interference of critique or expectation. When judgment is released, the mind becomes light and open. Life is no longer filtered through the lens of comparison or evaluation. and the self can experience the fullness of the present moment. Joy emerges effortlessly in this openness, as it always has, waiting not for reason or permission, but for the simple act of releasing the barriers we place before it. Joy is not something that comes from outside, it is a natural current within you, a subtle energy that flows when the mind and body are aligned. Most people remain unaware of this energy because attention is scattered, constantly seeking happiness from circumstances, possessions, or recognition. In truth, the spark of joy exists independently, waiting to be recognized and felt from within. Becoming aware of your inner energy requires stillness and attention. When the mind quiets and observation turns inward, the currents of vitality, aliveness and subtle delight begin to surface. This awareness allows you to tap into joy directly without needing a reason, without requiring external triggers. The energy is always present, but it can only be felt when you consciously direct attention toward it. Inner energy transforms the way life is experienced. When you sense it, moments that previously seemed ordinary or mundane are imbued with lightness and aliveness. A simple breath, a sound, or a sensation becomes enough to awaken joy. You no longer rely on external events or achievements to spark happiness because the source is already within you, continuous and abundant. Awareness of this energy also dissolves dependence on external validation. The mind no longer clings to outcomes or seeks approval to feel complete. Joy arises naturally, spontaneously, because it is a reflection of your own inner vitality rather than the circumstances around you. Recognizing this energy brings freedom from the fluctuations of life and a deep sense of being fully alive. When this inner energy is accessed consistently, joy becomes effortless. It surfaces without reason, without expectation, and without effort. Life becomes a reflection of your own aliveness rather than a reaction to events, and the self experiences a clarity, lightness, and bliss that is unshakable. Awareness of inner energy allows joy to flow naturally, reminding you that happiness has always been your true nature. Attachment to outcomes creates tension and expectation, which block the natural flow of joy. The mind constantly tries to control the future, to shape events so they match imagined ideals. In doing so, it loses the ability to experience life as it is. When the mind is fixated on results, every moment becomes measured against success or failure, and happiness is postponed indefinitely. Clinging to outcomes keeps the self in a state of restlessness. Every deviation from expectation triggers frustration, disappointment or anxiety. Even when life unfolds perfectly, the mind searches for the next result, never satisfied. This constant striving prevents the simple, effortless experience of joy that is available in the present moment, independent of what happens. Releasing attachment does not mean neglect or indifference. It means participating fully in life without needing a specific result to feel complete. Action can be taken, effort applied, and plans made, but the mind remains free from the chains of expectation. Joy emerges naturally in this space because it is no longer contingent on what occurs outside, but arises from the experience of being fully engaged in the moment. Detachment from outcomes allows clarity to emerge. When the mind is not bound by hope or fear of results, perception becomes sharper, choices become wiser, and energy is no longer wasted on worry. Life can be observed as it unfolds, and every event, whether expected or surprising, can be experienced fully without resistance, without judgment, and without compromise to inner peace. When attachment is loosened, joy flows spontaneously. It is no longer tethered to success, failure, or recognition. Life becomes a field for exploration, experience, and presence rather than a series of demands and expectations. Happiness arrives unbidden, effortless, and eternal, because it is rooted not in outcomes but in the freedom of being fully alive in each moment. Complexity in thought and desire often obscures the natural experience of joy. The mind continuously layers expectations, comparisons and ambitions upon each moment, creating a fog that hides the simplicity of life. Every desire, plan and imagined outcome adds weight to existence, making happiness seem distant and conditional rather than immediate and natural. Simplicity is not about denying life or ambition, it is about reducing unnecessary mental clutter. When the mind is free from overthinking, judgment and endless comparison, it opens space for clarity, presence and delight. In this openness, joy arises effortlessly because there is nothing blocking the awareness of life's inherent beauty and aliveness. Returning to simple thoughts and actions allows the self to connect with the essence of existence. Daily activities, interactions and experiences are no longer complicated by ego or expectation. Every gesture, every observation and every breath becomes sufficient to awaken joy. Life is experienced directly without the filters and distortions imposed by unnecessary complexity. Desire itself can be simplified. Instead of chasing endless goals, comparing yourself to others or seeking validation, attention is directed toward the essence of being. The mind rests in the present, appreciating what is rather than yearning for what could be. In this simplicity, the energy that was once scattered on worry, calculation and expectation now flows into awareness, presence and delight. When simplicity becomes a way of living, joy becomes constant and spontaneous. The self no longer relies on external factors or complicated strategies to feel alive. Life is experienced fully in its most natural form, and the mind recognizes that bliss has always been accessible, always present, waiting for nothing but the removal of unnecessary mental complexity. Silence is the foundation of joy, the space where the mind can rest and the heart can open. When the constant chatter of thought quiets, when distraction fades, a natural sense of aliveness emerges. In this stillness, joy does not need a reason or justification. It is present simply because the self is fully aware and receptive. The mind is rarely quiet, always moving between memories, expectations and judgments. This constant noise prevents the experience of pure bliss, keeping joy out of reach. When silence is embraced, the layers of thought and mental activity recede and the subtle energy of life is felt more directly. Joy arises naturally in the gaps between words, between ideas and between the endless activity of the mind. Silence is not emptiness, it is fullness. In stillness, the richness of existence becomes perceptible, the rhythm of breath, the subtle movement of energy, the quiet presence that underlies all experience. In this space, happiness is no longer a pursuit, it simply appears as a natural expression of being. The less the mind interferes, the more effortlessly joy manifests. Learning to let silence speak requires attention and discipline. It is a practice of not reacting, not filling every moment with noise or distraction, and not allowing thought to dominate awareness. In this conscious withdrawal from mental activity, the mind becomes a receptive instrument for experiencing the innate joy that exists within and around you, independent of circumstance. When silence is embraced fully, joy becomes spontaneous and unshakable. It does not depend on external events, achievements or validation. The self experiences life in its purest form and the natural state of bliss reveals itself effortlessly. Silence is not an absence, but the very presence in which happiness dwells, waiting to be recognized when the mind ceases to interfere. Life is constantly moving, changing and evolving. Resistance to this flow creates tension, frustration and dissatisfaction. When you attempt to control, manipulate or force circumstances to fit your expectations, the natural rhythm of existence is interrupted. Joy cannot thrive in this resistance because it is a spontaneous state arising only when the self is in harmony with the unfolding of life. Flow is not passive, it is conscious alignment with the movement of existence. To experience life as a flow means to engage fully, act decisively, and yet release the need to control outcomes. It is a balance between effort and surrender, between action and acceptance. In this state, energy is not wasted on struggle and the mind becomes receptive to the effortless joy that accompanies harmony. Resistance often comes from attachment, fear or judgment. The mind clings to what it wants and rejects what it does not. In doing so, it fragments awareness and blocks the natural experience of happiness. Flow dissolves these barriers because it asks nothing of the mind but presence, allowing life to be lived as it is, moment by moment, without interference. When you move with the flow of life, even challenges and obstacles become opportunities for awareness and growth. Joy emerges not from the avoidance of difficulty, but from the ability to engage fully with whatever arises. The mind that flows with life is lighter, clearer, and more open to the subtle currents of delight that are always present. Experiencing life as a flow transforms existence. You are no longer trapped in expectation or resistance, and joy arises unbidden, without effort or reason. The self becomes attuned to the rhythm of being, discovering that happiness is not something to chase, but something that is inherent in the movement of life itself, present in every moment when the mind ceases to interfere. Joy is not something external to be pursued or achieved, it is the essence of your being. From the moment you exist, this natural state flows within you, independent of circumstances, people or events. It is not dependent on success, possession or recognition. The deeper you connect with yourself, the more you recognize that joy is already present, always ready to surface without reason or cause. Most people search for happiness in the outer world, never realizing that the source has always been within. Achievements, praise, and material gains may offer brief pleasure, but they cannot create lasting joy. This internal energy is untouched by failure or disappointment, criticism or comparison. It exists beyond thought, beyond expectation, and beyond the fluctuations of life, waiting only for recognition to emerge. When joy arrives without reason, it is a reminder that life itself is abundant, complete, and perfect in every moment. You do not create it, earn it, or deserve it. It simply is. To live in this state is to experience existence fully, to see the world with lightness, and to move through life untouched by circumstance, anchored in the effortless bliss that is your true nature.